If it pleases the court, Your Honour, I appear on behalf of the accused, Mr. John Smith, in this matter and make an application for bail. This application is made pursuant to Section 8 of the Bail Act 1977. Mr. Smith presents before you, Your Honour, charged by police with the offence of causing serious injury recklessly, pursuant to Section 17 of the Crimes Act 1958. My instructions are that Mr. Smith intends to contest the charge against him. Your Honour, Mr. Smith is a 30-year-old man currently living in a long-term relationship with Miss Jane Hall, who is seated here today in support of Mr. Smith. Both Mr. Smith and Miss Hall reside at 123 Nepean Highway, Aspendale, in a home jointly purchased by both the accused and Miss Hall. If Your Honour pleases, I present the following supporting documentation to this effect. Pursuant to Section 5 A of the Bail Act, Your Honour is required to be satisfied that the accused is not subject to a family violence order, notice, or domestic violence order. On the facts, the charge before you relate to an incident involving an alleged assault upon a non-related, non-domestic victim. The prosecutor can attest to this fact. My instructions are, and I submit that the accused is not an Aboriginal Australian, is 30 years of age, and is not on remand. The category of the offence, causing serious injury recklessly, is listed in Schedule 2 of the Bail Act 1977. I respectfully submit that the circumstances surrounding this matter, the accused is required to show compelling reasons for granting bail. For Your Honour to satisfy yourself that the accused has satisfied the requisite criteria for compelling reasons to be granted bail, Your Honour is required to consider the following. Pursuant to Section 3 A, the alleged offence was serious in nature. Mr. Smith's actions recklessly caused serious injury. However, Mr. Smith presents with no criminal history or history of violence. Therefore, I respectfully submit that compelling reasons do exist. Furthermore, at the time of the offence, Mr. Smith was not on bail for another offence, subject to a summons, awaiting a trial, on parole, or subject to a community corrections order. These mitigating factors further satisfy that compelling reasons exist. Section 4D outlines the unacceptable risk step of the two-step test. If Your Honour has been satisfied that Mr. Smith has compelling reasons, this second step must be satisfied for bail to be granted. Pursuant to Section 4D, Your Honour is obliged to apply the unacceptable risk test. If Your Honour is satisfied that compelling reasons exist, granting bail for Mr. Smith is justified. It is the prosecution that bears the burden to satisfy Your Honour that a risk exists and that the risk is an unacceptable risk. If it is satisfied that there is an unacceptable risk, Your Honour must refuse bail. However, I respectfully submit that the prosecution has not satisfied this requirement. Pursuant to Section 4E, it is unlikely that Mr. Smith may be considered an unacceptable risk, given his prior circumstances. In applying the unacceptable risk test, Your Honour must be satisfied upon the following: that Mr. Smith is an unacceptable risk, otherwise bail must be granted. Prior to the offence being committed, Mr. Smith had no history of violent offending, and there is no evidence before you that Mr. Smith is at risk of committing another violent offence. Furthermore, the prosecution has not provided evidence that Mr. Smith would interfere with witnesses or obstruct the course of justice or refuse to surrender himself into custody. As I respectfully submitted during my opening statements, Mr. Smith is emotionally tied to Victoria and his place of residence. He is in a stable, loving, and committed relationship, is gainfully employed, and is the main financial contributor within the family unit. To conclude, I respectfully submit that the prosecution have failed to submit evidence to Your Honour that would satisfy Your Honour that Mr. Smith is an unacceptable risk, and that the evidence before you shows that Mr. Smith satisfies the requirement pursuant to the Bail Act for the granting of bail. Thank you for your time today. That's it.